Abandoned after mastectomy, I found new love. But now my ex is back, manipulating and scheming as I plan to remarry. Hi everyone, my name is Laura, and I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm in my mid-40s now, but my journey through cancer and its aftermath has defined much of my life over the past decade. Reflecting on everything I've been through, I feel compelled to share my story, hoping it might resonate with those who have faced similar struggles. It all started 10 years ago when I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. Hearing the words, "You have cancer," felt like my world had been turned upside down. The diagnosis was a shock, and the fear of what lay ahead was almost paralyzing. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, my heart pounding, as he explained the treatment options. The emotional and physical toll that cancer takes on you is indescribable. The treatment process was grueling. Chemotherapy left me weak and nauseous, while radiation treatment sapped my energy. But the hardest decision was undergoing a double mastectomy. I knew it was necessary to save my life, but the thought of losing such a fundamental part of myself was terrifying. My husband at the time, Greg, tried to be supportive at first. He came to a few appointments and held my hand during the early stages. But as the reality of my illness set in, he began to pull away. The stress of my treatments and the impending surgery was too much for him. He grew distant, spending more time at work and less time with me. I could feel our connection slipping away, but I was too focused on surviving to fully process what was happening between us. The day of my surgery was one of the most difficult days of my life. As I lay in the hospital bed, preparing for the procedure, I hoped Greg would be there when I woke up. But when I opened my eyes in the recovery room, he was nowhere to be found. He didn't visit me in the hospital, and when I finally returned home, he was gone. He left a note saying he couldn't handle the situation and needed to get away to clear his head. He never came back. Being abandoned by Greg was a blow that almost broke me. I was left to face the physical pain and emotional devastation of my surgery alone. I felt unattractive, unlovable, and utterly defeated. My confidence was shattered, and I sank into a deep depression. The days blended into each other, each one a struggle to find a reason to keep going. But slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I found strength in small victories, like managing to get out of bed in the morning and taking short walks around the neighborhood. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process my grief and anger. With time, I began to regain a sense of self-worth and purpose. I realized that surviving cancer had made me stronger than I had ever imagined. Over the years, I focused on my recovery and rebuilding my life. I took up new hobbies, like painting and gardening, which brought me joy and a sense of accomplishment. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones who understood what I had been through. I also became involved in a breast cancer support group, where I found a community of women who had faced similar battles. Eventually, I felt ready to open my heart again. The first time I saw David, he was sharing his story with the group. He had lost his wife to breast cancer 2 years prior and had been attending the support group ever since. His openness and vulnerability struck a chord with me. He spoke with such compassion and empathy, qualities that I hadn't experienced in a long time. After one of the meetings, David approached me. "Hi Laura, right?" he said with a warm smile. "I just wanted to say how much I admire your strength. You've been through so much, and it's inspiring to see you here." "Thank you, David," I replied, feeling a bit shy but genuinely touched. "Your story really moved me too. It's comforting to know we're not alone in this." From that moment on, David and I started talking more. We would stay after meetings, sharing our experiences and getting to know each other better. There was an immediate connection between us, a mutual understanding that came from having faced similar battles. One evening, after a particularly emotional support group session, David invited me for coffee. "I'd love to hear more about your journey, if you're comfortable sharing," he said. We found a quiet cafe nearby and settled into a corner booth. As we sipped our drinks, I opened up about my fears and insecurities. "It's been really hard," I admitted. "I feel like cancer took so much from me, not just physically but emotionally too. Some days I still struggle with feeling whole." David reached across the table and took my hand. "I understand, Laura. It's a difficult journey, but you've shown incredible resilience. And remember, your worth isn't defined by what you've been through. It's defined by who you are." His words were like a balm to my wounded heart. Over the next few months, our relationship deepened. We spent more time together, going on walks, cooking meals, and even attending more support group meetings as a pair. David was always there to lift me up on my bad days and to celebrate my small victories on the good ones. Our relationship was built on a foundation of trust and understanding. David never made me feel self-conscious about my scars or my past. Instead, he embraced all of me, making me feel valued and loved in a way I hadn't felt in years. Slowly, the walls I had built around my heart began to come down. One sunny afternoon, about a year after we first met, David and I took a trip to a beautiful botanical garden. We wandered through the vibrant flowers and lush greenery, hand in hand, simply enjoying each other's company. As we reached a secluded spot by a tranquil pond, David stopped and turned to face me. "Laura," he began, his eyes filled with emotion, "this past year with you has been the happiest I've had in a long time. You've brought so much light into my life, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." My heart started to race as he got down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. "Laura, will you marry me?" he asked, opening the box to reveal a beautiful, delicate ring. Tears welled up in my eyes as a mix of excitement and apprehension flooded over me. I thought about everything I had been through, the pain and the heartache, and wondered if I was ready to take this step. But looking into David's eyes, filled with love and sincerity, I knew he was different. He had been there for me through some of my darkest times, and I felt a deep sense of trust and safety with him. "Yes, David," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and we embraced, both of us overwhelmed with joy. It was a beautiful moment, a new beginning that I had once thought impossible. But even in that happiness, a part of me couldn't help but remember the trauma of my past. The fear of being abandoned again lingered in the back of my mind. As we began to plan our future together, I shared these fears with David. "I'm so happy, but I'm also scared," I admitted one evening as we sat on the couch, our fingers intertwined. "I've been hurt so badly before, and I don't know if I could survive it happening again." David squeezed my hand gently. "Laura, I can't promise that life will always be easy, but I can promise that I will always be here for you. I love you, all of you, and I'm committed to facing whatever comes our way together." His reassurance gave me the courage to move forward. We started planning our wedding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope and excitement for the future. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, but with David by my side, I believed we could face them together. With our wedding day fast approaching, David and I were in the throes of planning every detail. Invitations were sent, the venue was booked, and everything seemed to be falling into place. I felt a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation, but mostly, I was filled with a deep sense of happiness that I hadn't felt in years. Then, one evening, as David and I were finalizing the seating arrangements, there was a knock at the door. I glanced at David, puzzled, as we weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and my heart stopped. Standing on the doorstep was Greg, looking older and more worn than I remembered, but unmistakably him. "Laura," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Can we talk?" My initial reaction was a mix of shock and anger. "What are you doing here, Greg?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "It's been 10 years. "I know," he replied, his eyes pleading. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to explain. Please, just give me a few minutes." Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. David watched from the kitchen, his expression a mix of concern and protectiveness. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," Greg began, "but I've been carrying this guilt for a long time. I need to tell you why I left." I folded my arms, trying to maintain my composure. "Go on then. Explain." Greg took a deep breath. "When you were diagnosed, I was terrified. I didn't know how to handle it. I tried to be there for you, but as your illness progressed, I felt more and more helpless. I couldn't bear seeing you in pain, and I couldn't face the possibility of losing you. I know it's no excuse, but I panicked. I was weak, and I ran." His words stung, reopening old wounds. "You left me when I needed you the most," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have any idea how much that hurt?" "I do now," he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. "I spent years trying to forget. I tried to move on, but the guilt and shame followed me everywhere. I've been in therapy, trying to understand my actions. I came back because I need your forgiveness, Laura. I need to make amends." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had no right to seek forgiveness after abandoning me. But another part of me, the part that remembered the good times we'd shared, felt a flicker of understanding. I had spent so long trying to move past the pain, but seeing Greg again brought all those unresolved feelings rushing back. David stepped into the room, sensing my turmoil. "Laura, do you want me to leave you two alone to talk?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "No, David. Stay. You deserve to hear this too. I turned back to Greg. What do you expect from me, Greg? You want forgiveness? Fine. I forgive you. But that doesn't change what you did. I just want a chance to make things right. I've lost so much time already. Please, let me prove that I've changed, Greg said, his voice breaking. His plea hung in the air, and I didn't know what to say. The life I had rebuilt with David was suddenly overshadowed by the ghost of my past. I glanced at David, searching his eyes for guidance. David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Greg, I appreciate that you're trying to make amends, but Laura has moved on. She's about to marry me. You showing up now is just causing more pain. Greg nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I'm sorry, David. I don't want to cause any more pain. I needed to try. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us. I felt torn between the life I had rebuilt and the unresolved feelings that Greg's return had stirred up. It was as if all the progress I had made was suddenly unraveling. After a long, painful silence, I finally spoke. Greg, I'm glad you're seeking help and trying to be a better person. But you can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be okay. I've moved on. I'm with David now, and we're getting married. You need to respect that. Greg nodded, wiping away his tears. I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Laura. I truly am. I just hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. With that, he stood up and walked to the door. Goodbye, Laura, he said softly, before stepping outside and closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, the emotional dam I had been holding back broke, and I burst into tears. David rushed to my side, holding me as I sobbed. It's okay, Laura. I'm here. I'm so sorry, David, I cried. I didn't want this to happen. I don't know how to feel. It's okay, he whispered, stroking my hair. You're allowed to feel confused and hurt. But remember, you've come so far, and you're not alone. I'm here for you, no matter what. In the days that followed, I found myself in a constant state of emotional turmoil. My mind was a battlefield, torn between the life I had built with David and the unresolved feelings Greg had dredged up. I knew I needed to move forward, but the past seemed to have a relentless grip on my heart. I spent many sleepless nights lying awake, replaying the conversations I had with Greg and questioning whether I could ever truly forgive him. What would forgiveness even look like? Would it mean letting him back into my life, or was it more about finding peace within myself? And what would that mean for my future with David, the man who had been my rock through it all? Desperate for clarity, I turned to my family and friends for advice and support. My sister Rachel was the first person I confided in. We met for lunch at our favorite cafe, and as I poured out my heart, Rachel listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. Laura, this is a lot to process, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Greg hurt you deeply, and it's understandable that you're struggling with these feelings. But you have to think about what's best for you now. You've come so far with David. Do you really want to risk that? My best friend, Maria, was more blunt. Laura, Greg doesn't deserve a second chance, she said over the phone one evening. He left you when you needed him most. David has been there for you through everything. Don't let Greg's sudden appearance mess that up. Their words echoed my own fears, but they also added to the pressure. I felt like I was being pulled in multiple directions, each path fraught with potential heartache. Even my parents weighed in, urging me to think carefully about my next steps. They had seen how much I had suffered after Greg left, and were understandably protective. Laura, we just want you to be happy, my mother said during a family dinner. You deserve to be with someone who loves and supports you unconditionally. Remember that. Amidst all this, David remained incredibly supportive, but I could sense the toll Greg's reappearance was taking on him. One evening, as we sat on the porch, he finally opened up about his feelings. Laura, I know you're going through a lot right now, he began, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. And I want to be here for you, no matter what. But I'd be lying if I said Greg's return didn't make me feel insecure. I'm scared of losing you. His honesty broke my heart. David had been nothing but patient and understanding, and yet here I was, struggling to navigate my own emotions. David, I love you, I said, taking his hand in mine. This is just so complicated. Seeing Greg again brought back so many memories and unresolved feelings, but you're the one I want to be with. I know, he replied, squeezing my hand. But it's hard, knowing he's still a part of your thoughts. I want to support you through this, but I also need to protect my own heart. Our conversation left me feeling even more conflicted. I wanted to move past the pain Greg had caused and fully embrace my future with David, but the path to closure wasn't clear. I decided to speak with my therapist, hoping to gain some insight and clarity. During one particularly intense session, I broke down in tears. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Greg's return has thrown me into a tailspin. How can I move forward when the past keeps pulling me back? My therapist nodded, her expression compassionate. Laura, it's natural to feel this way. Forgiveness is a complex process, and it doesn't mean you have to let Greg back into your life. It's about finding peace within yourself. You need to decide what's best for you and your future. As I left her office, I felt a glimmer of understanding. Forgiveness didn't have to mean reconciliation. It was about freeing myself from the hold the past had on me and making a conscious choice to prioritize my own well-being and happiness. With this new perspective, I sat down with David again. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I began, my voice steady. And I've realized that forgiving Greg doesn't mean I have to let him back into my life. It's about finding peace for myself and focusing on our future. David looked at me, relief and love evident in his eyes. I'm glad you're finding some clarity, Laura. I'm here for you, and I want to build our future together. Let's focus on us and what we want for our life. Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, I decided to meet with Greg one last time. We arranged to meet at a quiet park, a neutral ground where we could talk openly. As I approached, I saw him sitting on a bench, looking lost in thought. Hi, Greg, I said, taking a seat beside him. Hi, Laura, he replied, his voice soft. Thank you for meeting with me. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Greg, I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything, and I've realized that I need to forgive you, not for you, but for myself. Holding on to this pain is only hurting me, but that doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. I've made so many mistakes, and I don't expect you to forget them. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. I appreciate that, I said, feeling a sense of closure. But my life is with David now. I'm moving forward, and I need you to respect that. Greg nodded reluctantly, hiding the strange gleam in his eyes. I will. I wish you all the happiness in the world, Laura. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced my past and made peace with it. Now, I could fully embrace my future with David, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to overcome anything. Returning home, I found David waiting for me, a hopeful smile on his face. How did it go? He asked. It went well, I replied, wrapping my arms around him. I finally feel ready to move forward, with you. He hugged me tightly, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love and commitment to each other were stronger than any ghosts from the past. And with that, we continued planning our wedding, ready to start the next chapter of our lives with renewed hope and determination. Just as life seemed to be settling back into a hopeful routine, I experienced a health scare that sent shockwaves through my carefully rebuilt world. It started with a routine checkup, something I had grown accustomed to after my battle with breast cancer. But this time, the doctor found something that required further investigation. I was referred for a biopsy, and the waiting period was excruciating. Memories of my first diagnosis came flooding back, and I was forced to confront my mortality once again. The fear and uncertainty were overwhelming, and I found myself questioning everything. What if the cancer had returned? What if I didn't have as much time as I thought? David was by my side through every step of the process, his support unwavering. He attended appointments with me, held my hand during procedures, and reassured me with his calm presence. His love and strength were a lifeline in those dark moments. One evening, as we sat on the couch after yet another anxious day of waiting, David took my hands in his. No matter what happens, Laura, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. As we awaited the biopsy results, the anxiety and fear were almost unbearable. Every day felt like an eternity, filled with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. It was during this time that Greg's true intentions began to surface. Greg had been trying to maintain a presence in my life, sending messages and occasionally stopping by to check on me. At first, I thought it was part of his attempt to make amends. However, there were subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. His concern often seemed superficial, and he would occasionally hint at his financial difficulties, though he never outright asked for help. One afternoon, I ran into an old mutual friend, Emily, at a coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable, as if she had something on her mind. After some small talk, she finally took a deep breath and said, Laura, there's something you need to know about Greg. I felt a pang of dread. What is it, Emily? She hesitated, then continued. I overheard Greg talking to a few guys at a bar last week. He was pretty drunk and, well, he was bragging about how he planned to get back on his feet by getting money from you. He even mentioned how he was using your past relationship and your kind nature to manipulate you into helping him out. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a wave of nausea and disbelief wash over me. Are you sure, Emily? I asked, hoping there was some mistake. She nodded, her expression filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Laura. I thought you should know. You deserve better than this. As I walked home, Emily's words echoed in my mind. The emotional turmoil Greg had stirred up, the pain of reopening old wounds. It was all part of his selfish agenda. He wasn't trying to make amends. He was trying to exploit me. The anger and hurt I felt were almost overwhelming. Furious and hurt, I confronted Greg. Greg, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sure, Laura. What's up? He replied, looking slightly nervous. Emily told me what you've been up to. She overheard you bragging about how you planned to use me to get back on your feet, I said, watching his reaction closely. Greg's face paled, and he looked away. It's not what you think, Laura. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Save it, Greg, I snapped. You came back into my life, made me relive all that pain, just to use me. How could you do this? I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do, he mumbled, his eyes filled with guilt. Desperation doesn't excuse manipulation, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You're not the person I thought you were. Stay out of my life, Greg. I don't need your toxicity. Cutting ties with Greg once and for all was painful, but necessary. It was a stark reminder of the importance of surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared for me. I felt a sense of betrayal and disappointment, but also a fierce determination to protect myself and my future with David. In the midst of all this, David remained my unwavering support. He could sense the emotional toll that the situation with Greg was taking on me, and he did everything he could to help me navigate through it. His kindness and patience were a balm to my wounded heart. The biopsy results finally came in, and thankfully, it was a false alarm. The relief was overwhelming, and I felt as though I had been given a second chance at life. The scare had forced me to reevaluate my priorities and reinforce the importance of cherishing every moment. David's support during the health scare solidified our bond even further. He had been my anchor in the storm, showing me what true love and commitment looked like. His dedication and compassion reminded me of why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to David, my heart full of gratitude and love. You've been my rock through everything, David. I don't know how I got so lucky to have you in my life. He smiled, pulling me close. We're lucky to have each other, Laura, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what. As we moved forward, planning our wedding and looking ahead to the future, I felt a renewed sense of hope and strength. The health scare had been a stark reminder of life's fragility, but it had also highlighted the importance of love, support, and resilience. With Greg out of the picture and my health scare behind us, David and I focused on building our life together. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but we were ready to face them hand in hand. Our love had been tested and proven strong, and we were determined to make the most of every moment we had together. As our wedding day approached, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I had survived cancer, faced abandonment, and dealt with the emotional turmoil of Greg's return. But through it all, I had found a love that was steadfast and true. David had shown me what it meant to be truly loved and supported, and I knew that together we could overcome anything. The journey had been long and filled with hardships, but it had also been a journey of growth, resilience, and rediscovery. And as I stood on the brink of this new chapter with David by my side, I felt ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that our love would guide us through.